Hey, it's me, your friend Shaun Proulx, and we've been doing something called COVID Conversations. Before we get going with that man right there, I just want to let you know that some of those COVID conversations have been taking place between SiriusXM's Alison Dorr, host of The Breakdown on SiriusXM Canada Talks channel 167, and you can go back in time and hear all of those. Positive spin that goes on between her and I about COVID-19 on ShaunProulx.com under Listen, or you can also watch some of the ones we've been having, like this one you were about to have, under Watch. The Shaun Proulx Show continues every weekend on SiriusXM 167 in classic format. I'm going back through the archives and curating episodes that have to do with what's going on right now in these times. And isn't it interesting the kinds of conversations we've had in the past that have a lot to do with what's going on right now. Right now, I want to introduce you to a man that needs no introduction. Jamie Campbell is the beloved host of Blue Jays Central and a Canadian icon whose voice everybody knows here in the country and across North America. And Jamie, welcome to COVID Conversations.
Thank you, Shaun. Nice to be with you.
Nice to have you with me. You're so popular and so well-known and well-liked that people have stopped you on the street before and said things like, "My dad loves you." And you've said before, well, let's call your dad up right now. Mm-hmm. And it's my understanding that that has led to one of the amazing things that you've been doing during this COVID-19 experience. And I want you to tell us a bit about that, because this is all about what people are doing that are out of the ordinary.
Yeah, you know, Shaun, the first time I ever noticed it, I was in a bar in Saskatoon, and it must have been close to midnight. And some young lady came up to me on the dance floor and said, "My dad loves you." And I said, "Let's call him right now." And it was very late at night. And
from the dance floor.
From the dance floor. And we made a phone call right there and then. We didn't wake him, oddly enough. She said, "He'll be up." And I remember distinctly thinking, what a bizarre situation. I was probably mildly intoxicated, so that's probably why I initiated it initially, but had a great conversation with this man and stayed in touch with his daughter and with him for a little while after that. And he got such a kick out of it. I remember thinking, we should do that more often. Maybe not at midnight on a dance floor in a bar in Saskatoon, but just do it more often because people seem to enjoy it.
How long ago was that?
This would have been 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. I noticed it happen frequently when people would say, "Oh, my grandmother loves the Blue Jays." And I'd always say, "Well, that's wonderful, and please thank her for us." And I just thought maybe I should take it a step further and say, "Hey, well, if you've got your phone, let's give her a buzz right now." So back when I knew we were being quarantined for an undisclosed amount of time, I thought, what a great way to reach out to Blue Jay fans coast to coast, to send out on social media a note that I am ready and willing and have the time to phone people. And as you probably know, Shaun, the use of the telephone has really disappeared. The way you and I are accustomed to using it, it's disappeared. It's more of a messaging era that we live in right now. So it's been wonderful for me.
That grabs me by the heartstrings. So you put this out on Twitter, and it's my understanding the response was immediate and quite enormous.
It was so enormous that when I activated this initiative on the 17th of March, I still have not been able to cover all the requests from the 17th of March. Wow. And it's like my milestone is to get to the 17th of March completed.
I know enough about you that you're on stuff. So to say that you haven't gotten all of those calls made yet says a lot about the volume of requests you've received.
It's been massive. I expect to finish March the 17th in the next 48 hours.
Wow. What call that you made has stuck with you?
It seems it happens every 3 or 4 days. Very, very recently, I took a request from the 17th of March. So keep in mind, that was some weeks ago, and made the phone call to the person who had asked me to call a lady in the Toronto area. And it turns out that her husband had died the day before. But I didn't know this, obviously. And the request that I received to call her came 6 or 7 weeks ago now. So my first inclination was maybe to leave her alone, but I could tell by her voice that she wanted to talk and she was happy to hear from me. And we ended up having a really nice conversation, a heartfelt conversation. Turns out we have mutual friends. And I think she needed that call from a stranger at a very, very difficult time in her life. They've been married 37 years.
Why when you could be doing tons of other stuff that's maybe for you, although I can understand why this is something that you would get a lot out of, why spend time talking to strangers? It's not something everybody would do.
Because we're all limited in what we can do safely, and it is safe for me to make a phone call to try and raise somebody's spirits. It's better than getting out and crowding myself in some way with people and trying to help them physically. And I knew this immediately. I knew that phoning people who would be isolated and scared and lonely, especially people that are, say, 65 and older, who are maybe in their retirement years. Maybe they rely on baseball every day as one of the things they're looking forward to, and now that's gone. So I thought, well, maybe a phone conversation of 10, 15, 25 minutes, half an hour, with a guy they're familiar with, though they don't know, might actually raise their spirits a little bit. And I have found that to be true, because in a way, because of what I do for a living, I'm the family member they never knew. I'm the guy that they see on their TV, they hear from time to time, but they've never met me, but they invite me into their world anyway, because I'm almost like a family member.
Yes. You can't do something like this without there being a personal takeaway, and I don't mean about the feeling you get, but what have you learned about this experience, about humanity, about the city, about Blue Jays fans? What have you walked away knowing now that you didn't maybe know before?
Oh boy, that's a deep question. I have learned that I'm insanely privileged to do what I do for a living, because most people just can't randomly call people during a pandemic and expect them to open up the way these people have opened up to me. So in a way, as much as someone might come away from a conversation with me saying they feel grateful for that discussion, in fact, I'm the one who invited myself into their life, and now I'm drawing really interesting stories and tidbits about their history out of them. And in some cases, I'll be perfectly honest, I've made notes on some of the calls that I've logged to say, if I'm ever in Woodstock, Ontario, or Regina, Saskatchewan, or Corner Brook, Newfoundland, or Port Alberni, British Columbia, take this number with you and stop by and have coffee. Because some of the conversations have gotten to the point where I could easily see myself connecting with these people again on a personal level, on a physical level, when we're actually capable of being back together.
You know, you started to say take notes. I was just about to say, when you said that, there might be a little bit of a book or a journal that you, or a podcast or something, the COVID calls.
Yes, oddly, a literary agent just reached out to me the other day. So
is that so? All right.
Yes.
Haley Wickenheiser and Ryan Reynolds put out a call for PPE delivery for what was it called? Conquer COVID-19.
Conquer COVID. It's a tongue twister. Yes.
And
right there on the hat. There you go.
There's my note right there on your hat. And you jumped from the phone calls, or maybe continued the phone calls, into diving into helping out with Conquer COVID-19. Tell us about that.
I noticed very quickly that Haley had put out a tweet asking for assistance in getting PPE to many of the frontline workers that she was working with. She's a graduating med student. And then her friend Ryan Reynolds amplified it to the point of, I guess when you have 4.5 million followers on social media, you can get the word out fairly quickly. Yes, he's very handsome, as you know. So I contacted Haley immediately and said, I'm here and I've got time. And I signed up for what we'll call the long distance drives. So any drive I do to deliver PPE is normally 3 hours plus so that I can get out into the smaller centers where, you know, the big cities are well served. It's the smaller centers that have a tough time getting very important product like protective equipment for their long-term care facility workers, their medics, their paramedics. And I just felt it was important to be the one person to raise their hand and say, I'll go 6-7 hours outside of Toronto if I have to. And part of that impetus was provided by a paramedic that I saw on Twitter from Timmins, Ontario, who said they needed PPE up there desperately. And I spent a small portion of my teenage years up there, and I've always wanted to give back to that city in some way. So I volunteered for a drive to Timmins, and I've actually been there twice in the last 2 weeks.
Wow. Now that's leaving the phone call zone where there's something safe in that. Now you're going out into the world. Hesitant about that at all before you took off into that adventure?
No, because it's safe too, in that I drive by myself. I'm not with anybody. These facilities I go to, I'm well protected myself with a mask and gloves. There's very, very little. There's personal contact, but it's all distanced by 6 or 7 feet. If I pull up to an EMS facility, for example, or long-term care, I drop the box in their laneway and they come out and get it. There's really no personal physical interaction with many of these people, so it's safe to do.
Any road trip adventure stories coming out of that for you? Anyone that, I know you didn't meet a lot of people, but hard to go all the way to Timmins without something.
Marvelous stories. At one point I was on a logging road outside of Iroquois Falls, and there wasn't a human being within 50K. And as I was driving, I noticed 2 moose calves in the middle of the road, just minding their own business. I don't think they'd ever seen a human being before, or an automobile for that matter. And they just stopped and looked at me for a while. So I stopped the car right in the middle of the road. Nobody was using this road anyway. And just watched them until they finally just sauntered off into the woods. And I just thought, boy, if I hadn't signed up for this, I would never have had this experience.
You would have missed that. What's this taught you, this whole COVID-19 experience? I think at this point, especially since it's gone from a sprint to a marathon for everybody, we've had that extra time to be in the great pause and think about the broader meaning, because this is so much more than a virus. I'm sure you'll agree. This is so much more. We're watching the earth heal. We're seeing great acts of love and kindness, going on right now. What's this about for Jamie Campbell personally?
I hope we find a nicer world to walk back into afterward, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I have dealt with mental illness in my family for several years, my extended family as well. And if I've noticed one thing during this period, it's that some of those afflicted aren't as anxious now as they used to be, because this rat race that we're all part of has ground to a halt.
Yeah.
So the pressure to be out in that world, competing and buying and achieving and scaling the heights of the corporate world, or
being busy, go.
Having to contribute to society, those people who can't handle that don't have to worry about it right now.
Yeah.
We've slowed things down. We've simplified things. We're spending more time with each other, even if it's this way. I've made more phone calls to my family in the last 2 months than I have in the last 2 years. Yeah. People are reconnecting in a really nice sort of organic kind of way. And maybe it'll be better for all of us when we get out of this.
I think we can sustain that. I believe we can.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. But the moment everything opens up again, people are going to want to jump back into achievement and acquisition and all of that other stuff. And those who can't deal with that properly might get lost again. So we're going to have to be cognizant of that and extend a hand when we can.
Well, we shall see. Jamie Campbell, it's been such a pleasure. You're such a voice in this country. And I want to say thank you for the very good works that you've been doing. I know that you've touched a lot of hearts and made a big difference, and I'm glad you could join us here today.
Shaun, thank you. I wish my room was as bright as yours.
It can be so. It can be so. Take care, Jamie.
Okay, Shaun.
Ciao.